welcome back to section 4-2. This is going to be part 2 of the section, and it's a much shorter podcast than the first one. So, ecological succession. Ecological succession is something where we watch how an ecosystem changes over time. Ecosystems and communities are always changing in response to either natural or human disturbances. An ecosystem changes, or as it changes, older organisms die out and new organisms move in, further changing the community. And sometimes this is done naturally, once again, by a natural disaster, or sometimes humans take control and will change an ecosystem. And if any of you live by the green belt, or even right behind Craig High School, behind the soccer field, they are changing that particular area. They're getting rid of all the dead old brush and replacing, or just leaving it so that the community can come back to normal again. So that would be an example of ecological succession. Ecological succession, the definition, is a series of predictable changes that occurs in a community over time. Now, one thing that you really need to remember about succession is that they are very slow changes to the environment. You don't get a full-grown tree overnight. It takes 10, 20, 30 years to get a mature tree. So these changes occur very slowly. There are also things like sudden natural disturbances that are going to cause changes to occur very rapidly. So a tornado comes through, or a hurricane comes through, or a forest fire comes through. That's going to change an ecosystem very quickly. Human activities such as clearing a forest, which I mentioned what they're doing down by the green belt, would be also an example of ecological succession. Now, there are two types of ecological succession. The first type is called primary succession. And you think of the word primary means first. So this type of succession is happening where no soil exists whatsoever. None. Nothing is there to begin with. It's just a clean, blank slate, a bare surface, so to speak. So bare rock exposed where glaciers melt might be a place where primary succession occurs, or volcanic eruptions build new islands or cover land with lava rock or volcanic ash. And if we think about Mount St. Helens out in the state of Washington that erupted, at least 15 years ago, maybe more. Now there is newer vegetation that is growing on that particular area, but it took many, many years to get to where that is. Pioneer species are the first species to populate an area. And if you think about the pioneers from your social studies classes, they were the first ones to pave the way. Out west, they were called the pioneers, and that's pioneer means first. So the first species to populate an area is the pioneer species. Examples of how this happens, well, lichens, it's not pronounced lichen, it's pronounced lichen, and a lichen is a combination of a fungus and an algae, can grow on bare rock. As lichens grow, they break up these rocks, and when they die, their organic material helps form the soil in which plants grow. So that would be an example of primary succession where nothing has occurred. Another way to think about primary succession is if you think about a new sidewalk or a new driveway and you have those little cracks between the blocks of cement, and when you have a brand new driveway there, nice and neat, and all of a sudden you'll notice grass growing out of there or weeds growing out of there. This is an example of primary succession because as the dirt blows in and then seeds grow in, plants grow out of those cracks. The other type of succession is secondary succession, and secondary occurs on a surface where an ecosystem has previously existed. So if we think about the word secondary, that occurs where something, that secondary would be like the next level, so where something previously existed. So examples of secondary succession would be areas that were disturbed or disrupted by humans or animals. And this could be, for example, clearing a particular area or plowing a particular area. Natural disasters such as storms, floods, and earthquakes. These would be areas where the tornado flattened all the trees and everything, and then new vegetation begins to grow over time. Cleared or plowed abandoned farmland. If you have cleared the farmland and then you just leave it and don't do anything to it, eventually plants will start to grow in that particular area. It's where something was destroyed, and then something comes back. The process of succession in a given area is always preceded in certain specific and predictable stages, and ends with a mature, stable community that did not undergo further succession, or a climax community. So the very end, when succession ends, this is when it is all done, we have what's called a climax community. This is where you have mature trees. And this particular process could take possibly up to 100 years. So it doesn't happen overnight. And the end result is going to be your, once again, your climax community. That's the end. So I've got a picture on the last slide to show you how this particular process works. So we start out with nothing. So we're starting out with just your sand dunes down here. So we're starting out where there's absolutely no vegetation whatsoever. And then our next step is we have these little grasses that start to grow out of the sand. So we have little grasses that are starting to grow. The next stage is going to be shrubs. So you can see right here the little shrubs that are starting to appear. Next is you're going to have your cottonwood trees. Notice that they are not that big. They're kind of a smaller tree. So they're starting to now form. These would be the cottonwood trees. Next we have the jack pines. Notice they're getting a little taller, and you still have a lot of this vegetation that continues to grow and be added to the particular community down here. Finally, you end up with a big oak forest. So that would be the end result, these large mature trees that are taking place. And once again, this may happen over 100 years. So we don't go from sand dunes all the way to an oak forest in a very short period of time. It may take, once again, up to 100 years. And the oak forest is called a climax community. That's your end result. Your climax community is your end result of succession. And this ends section 4-2.